Hello and a very warm welcome to Express Mobility. In this episode, we have been joined by Mr. Rajeev Singh, partner and automotive leader, Deloitte India. Rajiv brings over 22 years of experience across both industry and consulting. His area of expertise include market entry strategy, new product development, digital customer experience, and future of mobility. Thank you so much, Rajiv, for joining in today. First of all, I would like to understand, you recently did a survey and a study on global automotive consumer. What are the key findings of this study, if you can just tell us about it?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Dipanshu, and thanks for having me here. Very glad to be here along with Financial Express and you to share some of the learnings or findings that we had from this survey. So as you said, I think the survey reinforces some of the beliefs that we were having from an industry perspective. And it also kind of opens up some new areas. So just to share some key highlights, one of the things that we found in this survey, and this is something that we have been doing for the last 8 years, 9 years consecutively across different countries globally, is customers' preference towards more and more moving towards zero emission vehicles, I would say, not just electric, but more towards zero emission vehicles. So this year we found, for example, last year, 68% people responded that they would like to buy the next vehicle as ICE vehicle. But this year, the preference towards ICE has become 58, which means that balance 42% of the people would like to go towards zero emission vehicles. Of course, they have given their own preferences, whether it is hybrid, fully electric, and other modes of transportation and so on. But this percentage seems to have gone up from 32% last year to 42% this year,
Right,
which is a significant impact.
right.
The other key findings that we have had is around the digital customer that OEMs are trying to drive, or various players are trying to drive. There is also some findings that we have around future of mobility and so on. But a lot of interesting things that we could hear from the customer this year.
So when we say future of mobility in India is electric, and if we see ourselves around, home charging still remains a challenge because of metro cities, they're fairly congested, and then we have tier 1 and tier 2 cities where electricity is a problem. So how do you see it evolving in India?
So when we ask people, say for example, how would they prefer, what is their most preferred mode of charging their vehicles? 75% of the people said that they would prefer to charge their vehicles at home, not necessarily at public charging infrastructure and so on, which means that they would like to use their vehicles just like their smartphones, which is use it in the day and charge it by the night, most preferably at home. And when we delved a little more deeper into it as to why at home and why not at public charging infrastructure facilities and so on, a couple of reasons came out. One was lack of public charging infrastructure itself, which is apparently the most biggest hurdle at this point in time towards moving towards electrification. The second is also safety concerns, because they thought that they are not very sure in terms of the reliability of this charging infrastructure. And the third is with respect to theft, that I'll leave my vehicle probably in a public space somewhere and so on and so forth. So these are some of the concerns that came in. But the biggest concern, no doubt, remains as lack of charging public charging infrastructure, and that's the reason why more preference towards home charging and use it like a smartphone is what they prefer from an EV perspective.
Right. Moving in the same line, recently Government of India came up with the notification that they will bring up battery swapping policy, and that could probably solve a lot of problem which we are talking about today. How do you see that standardization in batteries, and then this battery swapping policy, fixed charging? What's your opinion on this, which will evolve further?
No, so I think it's not going to be this or that or one over the other or something. I think that we will move towards a hybrid state. And interesting thing is also to see what is happening in probably other geographies, because we continue to kind of do similar kind of surveys and studies across different geographies globally as well. So in China, for example, we find that both battery swapping as well as charging either at home or at public infrastructure, both coexist at this point in time. But the customer segments who are preferring this is different. For example, when it comes to public charging or home charging, 80% of the customers are the retail customers, or the customers who use the vehicle for their self-consumption.
Right.
But 20% of them are only the fleet customers. So 20% of the folks who are in the B2B segment are using public charging infrastructure or home charging. But when it comes to say, for example, battery swapping in China, it's exactly the reverse. 80% of the customers who are in the B2B segment or who are fleet owners go for battery swapping because they prefer battery swapping. But only 20% of the retail customers prefer battery swapping when it comes to a country like China. I think it's not going to be very different in India. It could be very similar to what we are seeing because from a perspective of size and spread, the two countries are quite similar or comparable in that nature. So I think that even in India, as we move towards battery swapping, we'll see the two coexist at the same point in time, and retail customers more preferring the home charging slash public charging infrastructure, and vehicles hence which are designed for them, which means the battery is not interoperable but a specific battery for that vehicle. Whereas in the fleet segment, we may find standard batteries which are interoperable, which could be used across different models and so on and so forth, or different makes and so on and so forth, but that would be more in the fleet segment. So that is how I see the market evolve in India going forward.
Yeah, it's very well put. Can you tell us about, how mobility as a service can, work in India in terms of, we have seen Ubers and Olas operating right now, but the mobility as a concept is changing now with the influx of electric technology. What is your opinion on this? If you can just bring some highlighting points, where Deloitte sees, how it moves forward.
So a lot of things, I think, when we say that we talk about mobility and both mobility of goods as well as people. So let me talk more about mobility of people to begin with first. And if you look at it in between for the last 2 or 3 years, our surveys did show that people were trying to move away from shared mobility to personal mobility. That was more around the health concerns with COVID. But this year, for example, we see once again a reversal of trend. We are finding that, okay, it's not gone back to the pre-COVID levels, but there is definitely a reversal in trend where people want to go back to shared mobility in some sense. People are also more open in terms of use of public transportation. So the percentage of people who have responded back as preferring public transportation and shared mobility has gone back to about, say, 57% or so, which is significantly higher. And 43% of the people have come back and said that they would like to continue with personal mobility. And this is overall mobility, I'm saying, not just people using vehicles, but also using, say, ride-hailing services, shared cars, shared
Right.
scooters, buses,
Right.
metros, and so on and so forth. Now, that's an interesting take, and I think that will continue as the health concerns go down. People will prefer to go back to shared mobility, and shared mobility will be in multiple forms. So we will see people wanting to have ride-hailing services, shared cars or pooled cars, and so on and so forth. Even scooters, two-wheelers. So a lot of people, about 6% or 8% of the people have said that they would prefer shared mobility in the forms of also scooters or two-wheelers, which is an interesting take because that market so far has not evolved in the country. But if there are significant number of people who will prefer to drive by a shared two-wheeler, it's an interesting proposition, especially for the two-wheeler players in the country. But I think that is the direction in which we will continue to see people more and more moving.
So moving forward, as we're talking about mobility as a service, and which largely caters to solving two problems of pollution and congestion.
Yes.
Now, what are the other key trends you foresee in reducing the congestion from the major cities like Delhi, Bangalore, Mumbai? What are your thoughts on that?
See, I think the ownership pattern is definitely changing in the country. The ownership pattern in the past was where people would have preferred to buy vehicles, say, for example. We did see leasing pick up in the country, and we did see a market for leasing as well. And then at the other end, we saw rental car services or things like that come up. But what we need to realize is that depending on the usage that the customer may have, they want different services. For example, if I prefer to buy a car and I want to use it only for myself and I intend to keep it maybe for 4 or 5 years, that is where, or more, that is where I would like to go ahead and buy the vehicle on my own name. But if I intend to buy a vehicle only for 3 years or 4 years, not more than that, and I'm also looking at some tax benefits and so on and so forth, then I may prefer to go for leasing as an option. But there is another interesting value proposition that customers are looking for. We see a latent demand for it, which is subscription services, which have not picked up in the country yet. But there is a latent demand. A lot of consumers who prefer to use the vehicle only for say 6 months, 1 year, or 2 years because they are mobile. They just move into a new city.
Right.
Say they are in a new city like Bombay, Delhi, as you said, for just maybe a year or 2 years. They don't intend to really buy a vehicle there. They are looking forward to solutions which are subscription based, which means that I subscribe, I just use the vehicle, pay by use weight on a daily or a monthly basis or something of that sort. And I don't have the headache really of any maintenance or depreciation of the vehicle and so on and so forth. And we see this typically more in the younger population, which is 18 to 34 years as an age bracket.
Right.
And that is something I think as a white space that some of the OEMs may want to tap into because there is a clear latent demand for that particular segment.
Right. A follow-up question to the personal mobility, how do you see the digital customer experience, is evolving, seeing the lot of influx of AR, VR, digital showrooms.
Yeah.
What is the feedback you're getting from the OEMs you're working with?
No, so of course OEMs are quite upbeat, I would say about it. OEMs, of course, are looking at not just kind of digitizing the processes, but going into the entire meta space in some form and shape, giving a complete digital experience to their customers. But we do see that there is some lag there. When we did the survey, we realized that a lot of people actually are still not completely comfortable with a virtual mode of buying vehicles. In fact, a significantly large percentage, which is about 67% of the people, said that they would prefer to still buy vehicles in a physical mode. A little more than 20% of the people also said that they are comfortable, but only with a virtually partial kind of a thing. They don't want completely virtual mode. They want partially virtual is fine with them. And some of the reasons that came out from an Indian perspective is like the Indian customers said that they would like to see the product before buying it. So that's a very high need currently. They would like to test drive, came up as the second most important thing, which can be partially virtual, which means you can do all the other things virtually.
Right.
But maybe for the test drive, you get the vehicle physically to the home of the customers. But the third reason is something that the OEMs may want to still think about. The third reason is more not from a global perspective, but only India perspective, which is the Indian customers would want to negotiate in person. Now, this is something more to do with the Indian behavior or the consumer behavior in India. And it's a significant number of people who say that they would still like to close the financial deal actually in person because they believe that they can probably get a better deal by discussing across the table rather than doing it online.
Right.
So while OEMs on one hand are trying to digitize a lot of their processes, get into more of meta and so on and so forth, I think there is a lag where the consumers are not yet ready to get there. But we see that year on year the trend is increasing of the customers who prefer online, but not yet there.
Yeah, but like models like Ola and Mercedes, direct to consumer, making a uniform price across India. So I think that will largely solve that problem moving forward. One last question on hydrogen, because that is one of the other important fuel that has been highlighted nowadays. Do you think it can play a key role in putting transport in fuel of transportation going forward?
Oh yes, I think that I think we are going to move towards those modes of transportation which are going to be more sustainable. I'm not saying that EV is not sustainable. Yes, I mean, let's try and also understand that even a fuel cell vehicle has a big component of battery, not as big as a fully electric, but yes, that also has a battery at the end of the day. Just that in a fuel cell vehicle, the battery is getting charged by the fuel cell, and hence you don't have the need to connect it to a power grid, and hence you can also have a smaller battery pack because the mileage problem to a certain extent gets solved. Very importantly, I must say that my experience in Japan, for example, when I was in Tokyo and I was looking at these hydrogen cars that Toyota has in say Japan, is the close resemblance to the current fossil fuel experience, which means that the hydrogen fuel, the current gasoline pumps that are there, the petrol and diesel pumps that are there, are getting replaced by hydrogen fuel cell pumps there. You take your vehicle there, you fill hydrogen into your vehicle just like you would have filled, say petrol or diesel into your vehicle. It's a very similar experience in terms of the time that it takes for filling and so on and so forth. And it takes away the entire range anxiety, because these vehicles can be driven for longer distances as compared to a fully electric vehicle. The thing is around safety, and the thing is how around entire manufacturing of hydrogen and so on and so forth. But once we get there, I think that is the fuel that we should look forward to as the fuel of the future. Also, it gives a lot of advantages, especially for those vehicles which require higher torque, especially say higher commercial vehicles, buses, or if you're looking at bigger SUVs and so on and so forth. It makes a lot of sense to have hydrogen as a fuel in those cases, given the high torque requirement. The fully electric vehicles require a lot of technology in between to really generate that high torque initially to make the vehicle move. But hydrogen fuel vehicles can make that comparatively easier.
Thank you so much for joining in today and sharing so many insights on future of mobility. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Dipanshu, for having me here. Thank you.